Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I apologize for the disappearance. I was on a hiking and camping trip, and then my editor was on a hiking and camping trip, and today we are going to be talking about a hiking and camping trip. So this is all happening pretty much in current time. The discovery of who we're going to be talking about happened actually a couple years ago at this point, but all of the updates are still going on. So everything that we're going to talk about today is current as of October 21st, 2020. I'm going to tell you right now that some of you will think that this is spooky. Some of you will think that there is nothing at all weird about this case. It's just tragic. But I personally get some Dyatlov Pass vibes from this, so I wanted to talk about it. And at the very least, I know that my channel is small, my watch is like way down even though I still have subscribers, but still, the chance that perhaps you know who this person is and can identify them is worth it. So today we are going to be talking about the death of Denham, aka Mostly Harmless, aka Ben Billamy. So a majority of my information today came from True Crime Society. It's a podcast. They have a great website. And I am going to be not only citing them, but reading a lot, because one of the things I loved is that there is a ton of information out there, not just from them, but other people. But what I loved about True Crime Society is that they did a timeline, and it really helped my lizard brain kind of wrap my head around everything. So I will be looking a lot at my notes because I want to make sure that this timeline is clear. Okay, so the great outdoors, we all know it. Most of us love it. I think there has been a huge spike in our love for it in 2020 because at least it's something that we can still do. We can go outside. And you know, many of us have done more hiking and camping trips than usual for that exact reason. But in general, hiking has always been a pretty popular pastime for bajillions of people. So whether it's, you know, a day hike with your dog or some friends and there's beer involved, you know, mid-hike, into the hike, or if it is setting out to hike the entirety of the AT, the Appalachian Trail, there's all sorts of ways to hike. But generally, if you are going to prepare for a really big hike, like the AT, like the FT, like anything that's going to take you multi-states, you're going to figure out what you need to take, how you need to pack, how you need to dress. And because of this, I was really curious as to, you know, I've never hiked the AT, it's never been on my bucket list, but I did want to research, because I've talked to a ton of people who have hiked it. How do you prepare, other than just like being in shape and understanding that you're going to be outside for a long time? Like, what do you need to do? So the info that I found on adventurepossible.com was to budget wisely, makes sense, pack light, and I'm putting emphasis on this one because we're going to circle back there. Get fit, of course, because even though you'll get fit kind of along the way, you want to be in shape enough that you're not exhausted, you know, half a day in. And line up a support person. Of course, you know, make sure that someone knows kind of what your plan is, what your general path is as far as you know, and also practice with your gear. So the packing light, the practicing, the support person, these are things that the subject of today's video definitely didn't do, and we're going to delve more into why that was not only amateur, but bizarre. So in April of 2017, our story begins. Denham, as he was known at the time, started hiking from New York. We think he also might be from New York, but that's just kind of our best guess right now. He went by the trail name Denham for a while because he was hiking in denim jeans. This was bizarre. Even if you are out for a day hike, you're typically not going to wear jeans. That's going to be super uncomfortable. They're going to get dirty really quickly. They're certainly not very breathable. And I would imagine that there would be a lot of chafing if you're going to be hiking any sort of distance in denim. So it was a strange move, but either way, he owned it, and that became his trail name. So following this timeline, 5 months later in September, he had made it to Daleville, Virginia. I found a ton of information on Reddit, and one Redditor said that they met him there and that he looked normal hiker skinny. So he looked pretty healthy, he looked thin, but he looked like you would if you were hiking a lot. And I bring this up because that's going to be very, very important later on in this story. So he looked fine, he looked healthy, he was in good spirit. So by the next month, he was in Damascus, Virginia. Some of you may know Damascus, it's where the Creeper Trail is. It's a great little biking, hiking trail, but he had made it that far. He got dinner with some other hikers that he had met along the trail. They took pictures together. He was in great spirits. He was a really personable guy, but he kept to himself as far as like his personal information went. So now it's mid-November and he makes it to Hiwassee, Georgia. This is a super tiny town in North Georgia that I happened to live for a while, and he stays at a hostel there. When you stay at hostels, generally you have to check in with a real name, not your trail name. So he checked in under the name Ben Billamy, which we would come to find out later was definitely not his name, but that's the name that he used. And before he, sorry, my cat's over there. And before he would check out, he wound up buying a 2-person tent. Now, a 2-person tent is not necessarily a terrible thing to be carrying with you on the AT or on any trail, but it's going to need to be a specific kind in order for it to be realistic to carry. Because again, even though you are packing a lot for this kind of trek, you need to pack light, and that's why there are certain kinds of tents made for long distance hikes so that you're not carrying 50 pounds every day. His tent weighed 50 pounds, so it was just another thing. So that compounded with wearing denim really was showing people he's definitely doing this, but it seems to be his first time. And you know, everyone has to start somewhere, but it just seemed like there was no practice leading up to such a long hike. It was really just like, I'm gonna go and figure it out. Also, the fact that this tent came, if you're keeping up with our timeline, 6 months into his journey is also a little bit strange, because generally you would want to have everything that you need before you get started. So again, just things to keep in mind, not necessarily like suspicious, terrible things, but interesting. So by December, Mountain Crossings, which is a neat little through hike that's in Blairsville, Georgia, had actually posted a picture of him on their Facebook, and it was taken the same day it was shared, so we know that he was there that specific date. And that also means that he had really only made it about 20 minutes down the road, because 20 minutes by driving, so you know, more than that, but not super far is what I'm saying. So in a month he wasn't moving like super crazy fast, and according to the caption, it said, "This is Denham. He worked in the tech world for the last decade. In June, he went for a 2-week hike on the AT in New York. Today, he passed through the shop. Hiking over half the AT wasn't enough for him. He printed data and purchased maps to hike the Pinhoti Trail in Alabama. He has sights for Key West, Florida. Bon voyage, Denham." He paid in cash, so there was no way to figure out what his real name was yet again. And the reason, if you're wondering why he bought maps and had them printed, is because he wasn't traveling with a cell phone, and we'll talk more about that in a second. So 2 days later, on December 4th, he was in Blue Ridge, which again by car is about 45 minutes down the road from Blairsville. So again, his time is sort of back and forth, because now to have done that in 2 days is not bad at all. But another hiker that was out there just for a day hike met him, and they were really the only ones out on the trail, so they wound up hitting it off and chatting into the evening. And this is where we get kind of the only information of any weight that we have about Denham at this point, because they talked about their shared experiences having abusive households growing up. And Denham said that, you know, he doesn't keep in touch with his family. His father was super abusive. He did mention a sister, and he also mentioned an ex-girlfriend. It doesn't seem that he mentioned dates of when it became an ex-girlfriend, but either way, pieces to the puzzle. He also mentioned that he had come from the tech industry, just like that post that was shared on Facebook had mentioned. And they also talked about their shared love of sci-fi, which ghosts, which will come back into play in a bit. So now it is the end of December, and he was seen at Salem Church Road, which is the first road crossing on the Pinhoti South of the Alabama-Georgia state line. So to me in this picture, I do think he looks thin, and there's a little bit of an illusion to me because actually where the pocket flap is, at first I thought that was his backpack, and I was like, holy cow, never mind, he is crazy skinny, but that's just his pocket flap. So if you are actually looking at him, taking into account that it is a puffy jacket, yeah, he looks skinny, but I don't feel like he looks gaunt. I don't feel like he looks unhealthy, malnourished, and I keep bringing this up because, again, we will circle back here, but I'm just kind of rolling marbles at this point for us. But let me know what you think. So now we are in 2018. It is January, and Denham, who is now known as Mostly Harmless, was in Crestview, Florida. There are two versions of the story as to when his name became Mostly Harmless. One is that he wanted to go and sit down with some people who invited him over to a bonfire along the trail, and when one of them asked, oh, who is that guy? The other replied, oh, he's mostly harmless, and the name stuck. The other that I actually think might make a little bit more sense is that since we know he had a love of sci-fi, he actually took the name Mostly Harmless from the fifth book of the series, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So that is the name of that book. So perhaps he just took that on, or maybe they both go together, right? Maybe someone said, oh, he's mostly harmless, and then maybe he connected the two and was like, I love that for multiple reasons. I don't know. Either way, Denham was now his old trail name, and Mostly Harmless was his current. And just as a quick aside with trail names, they are super duper common. We will see a couple other trail names in this story. And really, it's just because you can be anyone that you want to be when you're hiking, which can be scary or wonderful. And you don't have to be anything that you don't want to be. So the names are generally pretty cool insight into the person. But of course, in this case, it's just more mystery. Either way, Kelly Fairbanks met Mostly Harmless because she is a trail angel. For those of you who are not familiar with that term, it's basically someone who has devoted their free time to meeting people who are doing hikes. So they kind of meet them at through hike areas, and they feed them, they offer them a place to stay, they offer them like actual home cooked meals, they can shower. It's just really nice. And trail angels are all over the place and way more trusting than I would ever be, but good for them. So Kelly met him, and she took this photo of him I will put on the screen, and he's holding a sticker that is talking about his hike, and she asked if he wanted to come and take a shower, have dinner, stay the night, and he declined. So for any of you who are like, oh, well, she was like hitting on him or something, no, that's totally a common thing. And at this point, Mostly Harmless would know that. So he would know that it was an honest invitation. So again, I'm looking at this picture. I don't think he looks scary skinny. Yes, he looks thin, but I'm paying attention to his fingers, to his legs, to his face, and I think that he looks pretty healthy. So the story Kelly got, just like everyone else, was that he started in New York and was headed to Key West. She told him that he should download the Florida Trail Guide app, but he said that he didn't carry a phone. This is also a super risky thing to do as a hiker, and honestly just any single person in the world these days. But she gave him a paper map and helped draw a line to where the trail should be, because it had the state of Florida on it. Kelly pointed out when she was asked about this later that he seemed very new to hiking. The gear he was carrying was way too heavy. So now it is February. We've made it to February 22nd, 2018, and Mostly Harmless is in Monticello, Florida. So two women, their trail names are Snapper and Sugar Rush, were walking down 98 and entered the Aucilla Wildlife Management Area. They passed Mostly Harmless, who at this point was walking southbound. So they were also concerned to find out that he was doing the trail without a GPS, without a phone, without that Florida Trail app that Kelly had mentioned recently. And they exchanged trail information, and they said that they tried to be extra detailed because they knew that they probably needed to be, since he didn't have any sort of backup. 2 days later, on February 24th, he's seen in Pine Log State Forest, Florida, and this is when we learn he has a sister. So sorry, I misspoke earlier. I said he mentioned a sister. He hadn't up until this point. He mentions a sister, and he tells the person that he was staying with her in Sarasota or Fort Myers before starting the FT. And he ominously mentioned that he had some health issues and wanted to do this hike while he still could. Again, this will come up later because it doesn't make as much sense as it sounds at first. There are a couple confusing things about this whole interaction, though. The first of which is that if he had been staying with his sister in Fort Myers or Sarasota, they would be crazy out of the way. So like, yes, he could do it, he could get there, but for him to still be making the time he's making wouldn't really make sense. Of course, if he had gotten a ride, maybe it would be a little bit more logical. Technically, he could have taken some kind of public transportation, but if that were the case, I would expect him to have been cleaner when this person saw him, because he was pretty dirty. So I don't know, that just doesn't add up. But I also don't know why he would lie about that. I don't know. So moving on, now it is March 17th, 2018, and he has made it to Paisly, Florida. He meets a hiker today who would later say, again, he looked thin, but not unhealthy. He seemed to be in a great mood. He was really jovial. And when they spoke, Mostly Harmless again mentioned that he started in New York. And this time he seemed to suggest that he was definitely from New York as well. And that was really the first confirmation at this point that we had that he not only started there, but perhaps was a New York native. And he hasn't been reported by anyone else at this point in time. So no other people have come forward at this point and said, oh yeah, I also ran into him. He was over here. I saw him at this point. So from March 17th to July, we don't really know what direction he went in, if he passed anybody, if anything of any importance happened. But in July of 2018, in Okeechobee, Florida, Mostly Harmless, who was maybe from Brooklyn, had apparently spent a decade in the tech industry and was working on a hiker's app, which I think is really strange, because if you were developing a hiker's app, why wouldn't you be carrying a phone and comparing existing apps? Just a thought. So he was found deceased in his tent by 2 hikers in the Big Cypress National Preserve. Police were able to confirm that he had used the alias Ben Bellamy to register at some of the hostels, like we mentioned. My camera is doing weird color things. In his possession, he had a notebook of code and $36.50 in cash, as in $3,650 in cash. When the hikers found him, he was slumped in the corner, his body twisted and his eyes wide open. He weighed 83 pounds. So that means in 4 months, he had gone from thin but not scary thin to 83 pounds. There was food in his tent, and I looked it up because I was like, can you starve to death while still eating? And yes, you can. It's complicated, but you can do it. But the self-control that it would take to just completely not eat and actually starve yourself to death is unfathomable to me. So I'm not going to put autopsy photos in here because they're a little intense, and I don't really think it helps anything. But you can certainly find them on your own if you just want to. The autopsy findings are really frustrating because the cause of death and manner of death are actually ruled as undetermined, though the assumption throughout the report is starvation. He had some chafing and bruising around his penis, but otherwise nothing was out of place. So remember, he had mentioned to someone that he had health issues and wanted to do the trail while he still could. The coroner found absolutely no illness within his body. So I don't know what to do with that. He also had perfect teeth, so we can't look him up via dental records. He did have a very long scar on his abdomen that perhaps was from the removal of an organ, but according to the autopsy report, all his organs were there. Along with all of his organs being there, his bowels were absolutely full. So that's also strange, considering that he had starved to death. See what I mean? With so many people having met him and enough clues as to where he started and the family he had and an ex-girlfriend, no one has come forward to identify him. We don't know his age for sure. We don't know his name. We can't find any information about who this man is, where he really came from, anything. The Notebook of Code seems to be related to a game called Screeps. If you want to educate me on what that is, please do. From what I've seen in some comments, apparently his knowledge of the game was really good. Or actually, no. From what I've seen in comments, his knowledge of the game was kind of mediocre, but his knowledge of code is clearly remarkable. So perhaps it's true that he was in the tech industry, but again, did no one work with him? Was he fully remote his whole life and no one's ever seen this man? It just doesn't make sense. And there are some notes about food along the top, like it almost reads sort of like a grocery list, I think, like it's just like listings of food. And maybe it had to do with the game, maybe it was unrelated, or maybe he was developing like a trail bar for hikers. There are all sorts of theories about that. Thankfully, I found a Reddit post that as of October 10th, 2020, DNA testing for Mostly Harmless is complete, and at this point they are working on his genealogy and creating his tree. So Collier County Sheriff's Office will update when this is done, and so hopefully this means that it's not a matter of if we will ever identify him, but when. But again, why has it taken 2 years? Why is there no ex-girlfriend saying, that's my ex-boyfriend? Why is there no family, abusive or not, coming forward to say, yeah, that's my kid? Why are there no employees coming forward to say, yeah, I worked with him in tech? Like, how do you live a life of anywhere from like 30 to 50 years old, because they're not sure how old he is, and no one has ever known you? Do you see why this is so strange to me? It's so weird. So as for theories, there are a lot. Obviously, people are coming up with all kinds of ideas, natural and otherwise, but I know this video is already super long, so I'm going to keep it super short and basically say, it's possible he just died. I hate that idea, but it's possible he just died. As for anything else, honestly, even the crazy theories at this point makes as much sense as anything else. But either way, I can't shake how bizarre this whole thing feels. I can't comprehend how he just went from being in a great mood and, hey, how are you, to twisted, 83 pounds, eyes wide open, and a tent full of food. But he had no health conditions in his autopsy, and his bowels were full. I don't know. But please let me know in the comments what you think. Please, if you recognize him, if you think maybe, perhaps you recognize him, call the Collier County Sheriff's Office. Their phone number, and I will put it on the screen, is 239-252-9100. If you recognize Denham, Mostly Harmless, Ben Bellamy, please call them and also let me know. And that's it. Again, I know I was looking down a lot. I know I was reading from notes, but there is just so much and yet so little, and I didn't want to miss anything. I hope you enjoyed this. I also hope that it frustrated you as much as it frustrates me, because it is really making me crazy. And yeah, that's it. So as usual, let me know what you want me to talk about next. Thank you so much for watching, even if I feel like I'm maybe not talking to anyone. I love getting these things out there. So yeah, that's it. I appreciate you. I hope you're having a wonderful and spooky and safe October spooky season, and I will see you next time. Bye.